Ferrari did not beat Mercedes at Silverstone by finding more power. They beat them by making Mercedes waste the power they already had. That is the secret. Mercedes came into the British Grand Prix with the energy advantage, the weapon that should have protected them on the straights, helped them defend under pressure, and allowed them to control the timing of the fight. But Ferrari spotted the flaw. Energy is only an advantage when you choose when to use it. So Ferrari took that choice away. Charles Leclerc kept the pressure alive. Mercedes had to respond. Every defense cost a little deployment. Every threat forced another decision. Every lap made the advantage less clean, less comfortable, and less dangerous. Silverstone was supposed to be a Mercedes strength race. Instead, Ferrari turned it into an energy trap. Use too much early, suffer later. Save too much, risk Leclerc attacking. Defend now, lose freedom later. And by the time the British Grand Prix became chaotic, with Leclerc winning a dramatic race and the final result shaped by Antonelli's issue and unusual post-race penalties, Mercedes' strongest weapon was no longer controlling the race. Ferrari was. That is why this win matters. Ferrari did not destroy Mercedes' energy advantage by overpowering it. They destroyed it by forcing Mercedes to spend it at the wrong time. Subscribe to the channel. To understand Ferrari's plan, you have to understand why Mercedes' energy advantage was supposed to be so powerful at Silverstone. This is not a circuit where one straight decides everything. Silverstone is a chain. One corner feeds the next. One exit shapes the next straight. One defensive move can hurt the next braking zone. One burst of energy can protect a position now, but leave the car weaker when the next threat arrives. That is why Mercedes looked dangerous. If a car has strong energy deployment at Silverstone, it can turn small moments into protection. It can punch harder down the straights. It can defend from a car closing behind. It can make overtaking feel almost impossible, even when the chasing driver is close enough to smell the opportunity. But Ferrari understood the hidden weakness. Energy is not just about how much you have. It is about who controls when it gets used. That is where the whole race began to tilt. Because Mercedes wanted to use its energy advantage like a weapon. Save it in the right places. Deploy it at the right moments. Protect the car when Leclerc got close. Stretch the gap when Ferrari needed pressure. That is the perfect version of the plan. But Ferrari's job was to make sure Mercedes never got the perfect version. They needed to interrupt the rhythm. They needed to keep Charles Leclerc close enough that Mercedes could not relax. Not always close enough for an immediate move, but close enough to make them think about one. Close enough to force defensive choices. Close enough to make the Mercedes pit wall ask the question they did not want to ask too early. Do we spend energy now? That question is the first crack. Because once Mercedes starts asking it because of Ferrari, the advantage is no longer fully under Mercedes' control. Ferrari has entered the decision. That is what made the plan so clever. They were not trying to beat Mercedes by simply throwing everything at them in one reckless attack. That would have been too easy to defend. Mercedes could use its deployment, cover the move, and reset. Ferrari needed something more patient, more suffocating. They needed pressure that did not disappear after one lap. And that is what Leclerc created. He made Mercedes defend the possibility of an attack, not just the attack itself. That is much more expensive. Because when a driver sees Ferrari close behind, he cannot wait until the move is already happening. He has to protect earlier. He has to deploy earlier. He has to position the car with the next straight in mind. He has to think about where Leclerc might be, not only where Leclerc is. That mental pressure matters. A car with an energy advantage feels strong when the driver can use it calmly. But when the driver is forced to use it nervously, defensively, repeatedly, that strength starts to feel heavier. It becomes like carrying a shield. At first, the shield protects you. But if someone keeps attacking, not always to break through, just to make you lift the shield again and again, eventually your arms begin to tire. Mercedes still had the shield. Ferrari made it heavy. And that is why Block 1 of this story is not about one overtake, one lap, or one dramatic moment. It is about Ferrari changing the cost of Mercedes' advantage. Before Ferrari applied pressure, Mercedes' energy was a comfort. After Ferrari applied pressure, it became a resource under attack. Every time Mercedes defended, Ferrari was taking a small payment. A little energy. A little tire life. A little strategic freedom. A little confidence. One payment alone does not win a Grand Prix. But many small payments can destroy a race. That is what Ferrari was building. A slow collapse of comfort. And Silverstone was the perfect place to do it, because the track rewards rhythm. If Mercedes could control the rhythm, they could protect the energy advantage. But if Ferrari disrupted the rhythm, Mercedes had to spend energy outside the ideal plan. That is the trap. Use energy where Mercedes wants, and they are dangerous. Force Mercedes to use energy where Ferrari wants, and the advantage begins to crack. This is why the race became more than a battle of speed. It became a battle of timing. Ferrari's question was not, can we be faster than Mercedes everywhere? That would have been too simple. The real question was, can we make Mercedes use its strongest weapon before the moment where it matters most? That is how you beat an advantage without owning it yourself. You do not copy it. You drain it. You make it inefficient. You make it uncomfortable. You make the rival protect it until it stops feeling like a weapon and starts feeling like a worry. That is exactly what Ferrari did. And Charles Leclerc was essential because this plan required discipline. He could not attack wildly and destroy his own tires. He could not fall too far back and let Mercedes recover. He had to sit in that dangerous middle zone, close enough to force pressure, controlled enough to keep his own race alive. That is harder than it looks. From the outside, people often only notice the final move or the final result. But the real work happens earlier. It happens in the laps where the chasing driver refuses to let the leader breathe. It happens when the driver ahead has to glance at the mirrors again. It happens when the pit wall starts calculating not only pace, but energy, tires, risk, and timing. That is where Ferrari began to win. They made Mercedes manage too many problems at once. Not one huge crisis. Several small ones. And several small problems can be worse than one big problem, because they spread through the race. Energy management affects straight-line defense. Straight-line defense affects track position. Track position affects tire stress. Tire stress affects pace. Pace affects how close Leclerc can stay. And when Leclerc stays close, the energy pressure starts again. That loop is the secret. Ferrari created a loop Mercedes did not want. Pressure creates deployment. Deployment creates vulnerability. Vulnerability creates more pressure. And once a team is trapped in that loop, even a strong advantage becomes harder to use. This is why calling it a secret plan makes sense. Not because Ferrari had some magical hidden button. Not because there was a mysterious piece of technology nobody understood. The secret was the way they attacked Mercedes' timing. They understood that Mercedes did not need to be beaten everywhere. Mercedes only needed to be forced into spending at the wrong moments. That is the difference between fighting power with power and fighting power with pressure. Ferrari chose pressure. And at Silverstone, pressure was enough to turn the race. Because when the British Grand Prix became dramatic, with Leclerc ultimately winning and the final result shaped by Antonelli's issue and unusual post-race penalties, Ferrari had already done the invisible work. They had stayed alive. They had kept Mercedes uncomfortable. They had made the energy advantage less clean. And when chaos entered the race, Ferrari was positioned to benefit. That is what strong teams do. They do not always need a perfect race. They need to make the rival's race imperfect first. Ferrari did that to Mercedes. They took the one thing Mercedes wanted to control, when to use energy, and turned it into the one thing Mercedes had to constantly defend. That is the first part of the plan. Not destroy the advantage instantly. Make it expensive. Make it uncertain. Make Mercedes spend it before Mercedes wanted to spend it. Because once Ferrari controlled the timing, Mercedes' advantage was already cracking. But Ferrari's first trap was only about making Mercedes spend. The second trap was even more damaging. Ferrari made Mercedes doubt the value of saving. That sounds subtle, but it is one of the most powerful pressures in a Formula One race. Because when a team has an energy advantage, the instinct is simple. Save enough for the important moment. Protect the battery. Use deployment where it gives the biggest return. Keep the driver calm. Keep the car efficient. Make the rival work harder than you. That is the clean version. But Ferrari made the clean version almost impossible. Because every time Mercedes tried to think long-term, Leclerc became a short-term threat. And that is where the race started to twist. If Mercedes saved energy, Ferrari could close. If Mercedes spent energy, Ferrari had forced the cost. If Mercedes defended aggressively, they risked tires and exits. If Mercedes stayed calm, they risked giving Leclerc the momentum he needed. There was no comfortable answer. That is how Ferrari turned the race into a pressure chamber. Not by creating one giant moment. By creating a situation where every choice Mercedes made had a downside. This is exactly why Silverstone was so dangerous for Mercedes. At some tracks, a team can manage energy more quietly. The lap gives more recovery, or the overtaking zones are less punishing, or the chasing car cannot stay close enough for long enough to keep pressure alive. Silverstone is different. The speed stays high. The corners demand commitment. The straights arrive after sections where the tires and the car have already been loaded hard. So if a rival keeps you under pressure there, your energy advantage does not exist in a calm, protected space. It exists inside stress. And stress changes everything. Ferrari understood that Mercedes did not need to lose the advantage completely. They only needed to make Mercedes question how to use it. That question is expensive. Because the moment a team hesitates, the rival has already entered the race plan. Before Ferrari applied pressure, Mercedes could think like Mercedes. After Ferrari applied pressure, Mercedes had to think like a team being hunted. That is a completely different mindset. A team in control says, this is when we deploy. A team under pressure says, do we need to deploy now? That one word changes the race. Need. Because need means the rival has influence. Need means your plan is being interrupted. Need means your strongest weapon is no longer being used only for attack, or efficiency, or perfect timing. It is being used for survival. And once Ferrari forced Mercedes into that world, the energy advantage started to feel smaller. Not because the system disappeared. Because the freedom disappeared. That is what Ferrari was really attacking. Freedom. The freedom to choose the lap. The freedom to choose the straight. The freedom to choose whether to spend or save. The freedom to control the final phase instead of arriving there already compromised. Leclerc's job was to take away that freedom without destroying his own race. That is the difficult part. Pressure is only useful if the driver applying it stays alive. If Leclerc pushed too hard, he would burn the tires. If he attacked too early, Mercedes could defend and reset. If he dropped back, Mercedes could breathe, recover, and rebuild the advantage. So Ferrari needed a very specific kind of aggression. Controlled aggression. Close enough to hurt. Patient enough to last. Fast enough to threaten. Smart enough to wait. That is not easy, because drivers are not machines. When a win is possible, the temptation is to attack the first opening. To force the issue. To make the dramatic move.